Welcome to the Thriving Tides podcast. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Julianne. If you're an entrepreneur or busy individual looking for self-care ideas, you're in the right place.
And we can't wait to share our experiences with you.
Let's talk company culture.
Ooh.
Yeah. Right? Like, I don't have a song for this one.
I know.
There's no like jazzy intro.
And I feel like the heat is getting to us in the closet. We're starting to get a little bit loopy from the heat.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. August.
But yeah, I thought company culture would be something interesting to talk about because there's so many different angles with this. It's, you know, you could think about it in terms of like a huge, like, global company that's got like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees. And then we could think about like our own businesses that is just us. And regardless of how many employees you have or none, you still have a company culture. And it's important to recognize what it is and be really intentional about cultivating it, building it, and truly living it so that people understand what your business is.
Exactly. And also what company culture isn't. Because I feel like that's another thing too, is no one really knows what company culture actually is. I think we all think pizza parties is a company culture, or
it's not.
No, it is not. So I actually found a really cool article, and we'll definitely be attaching it to the show notes for sure. But they actually have their defined definition of company culture is: company culture can be defined as a set of shared values, goals, attitudes, and practices that characterize an organization. And it's funny because it actually is really important, since 66% of job seekers consider a company's culture and values the most important factor when considering career opportunities.
That's a large percentage.
That
66.
is a huge percentage. And I'm sure it might be even more if people understand what it actually is and what it means as well. So I think that's something we need to talk a little bit about, especially if you do have employees.
Yeah. Or the intention of having them eventually.
Exactly.
Right? Like, if you could start from the ground up, that's a great spot.
Right.
But if you're already established and you don't have a culture, or you don't have like a really defined one, it's not too late. You can always reel it in and really get clear on what it is.
Exactly.
Do we first want to talk about what it isn't?
Yes, let's definitely talk about what it isn't.
And it's funny, like, when we think about this too, I also think like company culture, and I relate it to engagement. And those who work in the corporate world will understand that. I think, like, you want your employees to be engaged, because then they work harder for you and they actually care about what they do. And you can't engage people by just like buying them off. Like, they truly have to feel really connected to what is the purpose of the organization, and then what is their individual purpose, and how does it relate to that as well, so that they know that what they're doing every day really matters.
Exactly.
And just, you know, buying them a coffee or throwing a pizza party or whatever, it really doesn't help that.
Exactly. Like, yeah, sure, it's a perk, but that's a perk.
Oh, yeah. Still
not
great to have. I'm not saying don't do it.
Yeah. Like, it's not part of the actual company culture. I think it does go back to branding, especially when you think about branding in the sense of, like, you're determining your values. Now, the part where company culture comes in is that you're not saying, this is our values, stick with it. You're trying to find people that fit in your values. So, for example, if you are a vegan company, for example, you're not going to hire someone that's chowing down meat for every meal. You know, that might
Sitting
not align.
At the front desk eating a burger when your customers are coming in.
Exactly. Or like behind their back saying, oh, I really don't like eating vegan. You know, that doesn't align with like the company culture. So it does come back to even like hiring people. So yes, we can think about it as a job seeker looking for company culture as an aspect, but we also have to think about ourselves as business owners possibly hiring people. Are they going to fit with not only our values, but even our team values? Like, that's another thing too. Like, are they going to be that team player and collaborate well with others?
Right.
Because, yeah, skills are great, and obviously skills are important when you're job seeking, but if they don't fit with the team overall, that could really damage your company culture as well.
Big time. Yeah. Yeah, especially when you're still small and growing, right? If you
Oh.
bring one bad apple in,
Really though.
just ruins them all.
But another thing too that company culture is not your business goals, like things like your KPIs to like or like your sales goals and stuff like that. That is not company culture. I see that all the time and I'm like, well, that's not really part of it. Like that's a business goal. That's not a culture goal.
Yeah, like
that always was weird to me. I'm like,
yeah.
Why are we bringing KPIs into
it does not fit. Does not fit there at all. Like I think of it as like, how do I come back to this? I think of it as that purpose, right? It's like, or that like way of being. Yeah. So it's, you know, are we always trying to make things easy for the customer? Are we really environmentally focused? Like what are the things that really define the way that we make decisions and the way that we interact with one another and with our clients, with our suppliers, with everybody? Yeah. I think that those are all important things to think about when you're thinking about what your culture truly is.
Exactly.
And also, like, is it fun or is it very, like, straight and narrow? Or, you know, like, what is the vibe? And when, like, if we were to go walk through an organization, we should be able to get a sense of the company culture just by, like, interacting with a few of the employees and, you know, seeing, you know, even how does the place look? Is it clean and organized, or is it just like look like a bomb went off in there? All of these things are indicators to your employees who are there every day, or your customers who might be coming through the door, of what do you truly value and what's really important to you as an organization.
Exactly.
And some of this might feel really like, oh God, like I'm a solopreneur. I work out of my house. Like what has company culture even got to do with me? But you may not know where your business is going to go. Maybe you will stay a solopreneur forever and that is the ultimate goal, and that's fine. But you should still give some thought to what your culture is. And, you know, like this is a business that you're running. It's not a hobby.
Yeah.
What was the you posted something on Instagram about your business being a hobby?
Oh, what today. Did that say? Yeah, it was someone like posted a picture and I had to share it because I thought it was really cool. It's like a cup, a coffee cup, and it says, if you're not selling anything, you just have a really expensive hobby or something like that. Yeah. And it's so true that it's like, yeah, you kind of need to actually make sales in order for it to be a business not just a really expensive, time-consuming hobby.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so you should take things seriously, right? Like if it truly is a business, then go through all the steps. Like you probably, you know, you picked your name, you got a logo, you did all the things, but why stop there? Why not also develop a culture for yourself in, you know, how do I want to show up every day and how do I want to interact with my partners, my vendors, my clients? How do I want to treat myself? Yeah. Right? Like you are your one employee. That's important too. Like you matter.
And it's like setting up those values, those boundaries for yourself as well, and like putting that out there. Because yes, you're by yourself, but you probably have clients and or customers that are a part of your company culture, even if just for a couple weeks or a day. Yep. They're still experiencing your company. Absolutely. So like if you're all disorganized or like you outwardly just are like, if you're inconsistent with your messaging, it could like actually like be a detriment to your business because it might look like you don't have everything all aligned. Like, and yes, you're not, most of us don't have everything aligned. I'll be the first to admit it. But like, online, you probably should show a little bit of yourself being all put together in a sense. Yeah. And that's where, like, again, branding comes back in, where you can actually really think about, like, what are my values? What do I stand for? Like, so, for example, I don't work with companies that are meat focused because I'm vegetarian. That's a very clear one. Like, I don't even follow accounts that, you know, are about meat. Like, that's not my cup of tea. Yeah. So, I think we can kind of discredit it as solo entrepreneurs and like, I'm just by myself, I don't have to worry about these kinds of things. But if you start defining them, it can also make it seem a little bit more real for your business, and perhaps mitigate any imposter syndrome or ego-based things, because you have a set rule system for yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it also helps you recognize, like, where should you be focusing your attention, right? Like, we had talked about what to say no to and things like that in the past too, right? And it's like, well, if you already know, you're not even going to entertain talking to a meat packing company or whatever it might be, right? Like, you don't even have to put the energy there because it's already been defined for you.
Yeah.
So if you start to get really clear on what are your values, and then when you're choosing partners or figuring out what clients you're going to work with, you can see, okay, what are their values and are they really aligned with what I'm trying to do here too?
Exactly.
And if they're not, then just wish them luck and be on your merry little way.
Exactly.
You don't have to force it or feel guilty about it, because you should actually just feel really proud that you're standing true to what your values are and you're not bending your culture or muddying the waters just to get the work.
It's so true. And I always go back to like the energy of it. Like, I probably will not feel great the whole entire time working on that kind of a project.
Yeah.
Why would I align myself with that kind of energy?
Not worth it.
And I think that's another, again, going back to like the company culture and like the workplace. Why would you align yourself with like a workplace that's very misogynistic, for example? So there's a big thing going on in the news about Blizzard. They do like a lot of like games and stuff like that. I don't really know the games that they do, but they do like a lot of that kind of stuff. And they had a very misogynistic culture, and it was terrible. Like, if you are interested in it, like, go Google it. It's so heartbreaking. And they're like, females are finally getting their voice heard there. And the thing is, like, that will hurt a company nowadays, because we also think about it, it's social media. As soon as that started like coming out, more and more people start coming out with the stories. Even people that have moved on from the company and said, I don't align with this culture, they're not coming back. So there's a lot of people that are now boycotting those games.
Good for them.
You know? And the thing is, there might have been, like, yeah, sure, there might be some people that are fine on, like, the boards or whatever, and are part of the business that love the business. And it sucks, because when you align with that kind of culture, it's probably not good for you, because then you're not proud to be like, I work at this place anymore.
Yeah.
And I always kind of think about that. Like, it's embarrassing. Yeah.
Yeah, those are important things to know. And if, like, especially like when we go back to, what was it, 66% of job seekers look at a company's culture and values. So now anyone who might have ever considered wanting to work there, especially any females, would be like, no, thank you.
Right.
That's out there now. That's public knowledge, public domain. Huge to factor in. I remember back when I was like considering Intact as an employer, and they're a very large organization. I think when I joined them, they were roughly 10,000 employees across the country.
Wow.
When I left, I think they were at like 14 or 15. So they had grown substantially in the 7 years that I was there. And that can easily, like, when you grow and you're that big, it's how do you maintain a culture that's strong through that many people and that many channels? But I feel like they did a really good job of it. And I, before even joining, was like, what really, really matters to me, and then what matters to them. And it was all out there on their, on their website. I talked to a lot of people that worked there. I went through 3 different phases of interviews, including flying to Toronto for my final one. Like, there was a lot to it. So I could tell that they took things seriously. And I made sure that it wasn't just words on a wall, right? Because sometimes that's it too. It's like, okay, we've defined our values. They're up on the wall. We're good.
It's not lip service.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, you need to really fully believe and understand that they're living these values. And if they didn't align with my personal values, then I might not have enjoyed working there so much.
Exactly.
Right? But like, integrity and respect were 2 of the key corporate values there. And for the most part, I wouldn't say every single person lived those values, but they were very predominant in most of the people that I interacted with there, which was great. And if it was lip service, I never would have lasted that long.
Exactly.
No way. But to be able to have those conversations even in the process of looking for a job, I think is really important too. Because if you're going in for interviews and people won't even really talk to you about that, red flag.
Right. And that's another thing that I think is starting to bubble up nowadays with like company culture is even just listening to your employees. So often it's like, this is our set rules, like it or not, here you go.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, like everyone's kind of realizing, I want the opportunity to be a part of everything. I'm going to stay if you actually listen to me. And we kind of talked about that a little bit on our like, let's get virtual episode too, that we recently did. Let's get virtual. Where like people are wanting to stay home. So listen to your employees. What are they saying? And that's why like a lot of people are like, again, I got the pulse on TikTok about this. Everyone's petitioning about doing like a walkout on October 15th, I think it was. Don't quote me on that. But there's like some specific date that's going around on TikTok that people are like, we're gonna walk out if
of
like
where?
We can't.
Like lots of organizations?
Yeah, like they're just gonna or like if they're like businesses that can't go remote, but even just to get paid more. Because this is another thing too. There's a lot of businesses that aren't properly paying their employees for how much labor they actually do, and that's a whole other can of worms when it comes to company culture. But I think that goes deeper than company culture. Really, that's a systematic shit there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's listening to your employees and what they're actually saying. So like one of the TikToks was like, it was about going back to work and going remotely, and they're like, oh, we did a poll and like we're excited to see like what you guys and you guys all said we're you guys want to work remotely, but guess what? We're all coming back to the office, and then it's like, why did you do the poll?
Yeah, if you weren't gonna get...
If you weren't... and that's the thing, because businesses are starting to realize that they need to, like, have the communication, but it's like, if you're not going to actually actively listen and implement the rule, like, not the rules, but, like...
Yeah.
What your people are saying. Exactly. Why ask for the feedback?
Yeah. 100% of you said you want this, and therefore we're going to do that.
The opposite. And
wow.
How easy is it, though? Again, I don't really know running a big business or anything like that, but how easy is it just to even have the conversations and tell them why we're doing X, Y, and Z? Or like we said, maybe do the hybrid option, for example.
There's so many things that can be done.
Exactly. But like just to discredit and not listen to like why, like these people are saying, hey, our life is so much better because we can actually spend more time with our kids and not be driving half the time.
Yeah.
Don't you want people to be excited to go to work because they still have enough energy to go home and still live the day, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's really disheartening.
It's so fascinating to me. And again, I feel so lucky for myself to be like a solo entrepreneur. And like even what I do, I only search for remote jobs, and that's why when I took that job, like that's part-time.
Yeah.
I did it because I can also still stay remote. Yeah. I like my life, so I'm not going ever. Like we said in the Let's Go Virtual, I will never go back to an office unless I absolutely have to. So I feel super lucky to sit in my little closet and just look at everything. But I feel so bad for those who are out there that feel like their hands are tied and their company's not listening to them. And then you see posts about people saying that they don't want to work anymore and they hate their life and what's the point of life anymore. And I'm just like, that's just so sad. I hate that.
Yeah.
Like I just want everyone to be happy.
Right?
Just all be happy.
Well, and like it's just like what a waste also for the organization to take all the time. So you took the time to put together the survey. You asked people for their opinion. They've taken time out of their work days to respond to it. And then you're not even listening to what it was. So like, hello, all this wasted bullshit energy and time and money. And it's just like, oh, let's just throw that down the drain. Oh, but we asked them what they want, you know? And I get that, yes, you can't just give your employees everything that they ask for.
Yeah, like...
But if you already have made up your mind on what a decision is going to be, why would you give them any false hope?
Yeah.
Dumb. That's all I have to say about that. It's dumb.
But I think half of it too is that people just want to be heard. Because yes, you can't give everything to everyone. But I think even just having the conversation of explaining certain things and like why certain things can't be in place. Like, so for example, maybe there is a part where like you guys have to work a hybrid situation because fully remote doesn't really work because X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But if you tell people why, I just feel like there's so many people that are just kind of like, no, this is the rules.
Yeah.
And I've worked in so many jobs like that. Like
Yeah.
that's most of the jobs that I've
Yeah.
ever worked for. It's just like, these are the rules and that's it.
Yeah. Well, that comes down to like, so what is your company culture? Is it to have open and honest communication? Is it to have respect for one another? Those are all the things that kind of set the tone that's in there too, right?
Yeah.
So, the explaining why is very important. But if you don't already have the tone or the culture that there's this two-way communication, then do you have management who are trained and comfortable to sit down with their staff and say, I know this isn't going to be a favorable opinion, but this is what the business needs are, and this is why we're going to have to do this. And we understand that, you've probably really enjoyed working from home or whatever it might be. I think we're talking about the virtual thing because it's such a big
topic
thing right now. But there's so many other things that come up too, right? It could be about like personal time or how vacations divvied up or all these different things. Like we went through a big, like I oversaw the entire contact center for like the workforce and everything, like even the workforce team who planned the scheduling for the contact center and everything was under my division. And we got to a point where it was just so big and like vacation requests were getting out of control. And so we opened a vacation bid at a certain time, and then like it went a bit by like seniority and different, and like what level you're at and all this different stuff. But like that was a big transition to get to that. We had to have lots of conversations about why we're changing this and how it works and why it's an improved thing. But it was different and it was change, and you had to be very open, and we had to hear the feedback, and we didn't know if it was going to work perfectly. Yeah. And we had to be open to that feedback from them of like, this isn't working because of this, and then how can we change it? But that's just that open and honest culture that you have to be able to develop. And if people don't feel like they can come to the leader and say, I don't like this, or I'm not sure about this, or I'm not really understanding why this decision was made, then they're just going to be really disgruntled and pissed off and bitch about it to their peers and to everybody else. And then that can ruin your reputation really fast too.
Yeah, exactly. So true.
Wild.
Another thing that I kind of want to touch upon in that article, I think kind of alludes to as well, is also, again, it really is important to who you're hiring on your team. So it's called the company culture vultures.
Ooh.
So people that actively, not like they don't probably go out of their way to be a culture vulture, but they are kind of I know, say that like 7 times, but it's people that aren't really going to try to be a part of the team or the greater good of the actual company. So again, not a team player.
Yeah.
So most of these people are led by ego. So in my honest opinion, I think that they are willing to cut down and put others down in order to then boost their success. And I've known so many, like I've seen it, and the thing is, it's hard to spot those company culture vultures. And the thing is, their negativity could also be super contagious. So are they always kind of in the drama triangle there? Are they always kind of testing? Like, and I'm sure that must be so hard as a leader, because you probably don't really notice what other employees are saying. So like, how do we even navigate that? I have no idea. It must be so, I don't know how people manage people. But like, that's why I think it's so important just to like not hire just on credentials, where you actually have to look at the person as well. They could be super skilled, but if they're not going to fit with your team and they're just going to cause your team to then not work or perform to their best capabilities, that's a cause for alarm, because it's going to be harder to replace 5 people than it is to replace 1 person.
Oh, big time. You're reminding me of like one of my favorite hiring practices that we had, because we would hire like 10, 15, 20 people at a time sometimes. Like we'd have a lot of bulk hires, as we called them.
Yeah.
And so we would bring a ton of people in. We'd do a presentation about the company, the department, the role that we were hiring for, and then we would do like speed interviews. So we'd have a whole bunch of leaders lined up at the back of tables, and we'd be interviewing about half of them at a time. The other half would be mingling. And we started bringing some of our key talent down to mingle with those others.
Oh.
And then after we finished like all the rounds of interviews and all the candidates left, we would sit around and debrief. And we would talk about how the speed interview went, but then also those key talent would tell us what they learned about these people in the mingling. And at times, there was someone who nailed the interview,
but
who was a dick in the mingling. Either they said something inappropriate, or they asked like some very interesting questions, or they just like were completely disengaged. That was very telling.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we were able to skip over having some of those culture vultures in that sense, where we otherwise would have hired them because they nailed it in the interview questions.
Yeah.
But in the how would they get along with their peers, or how did they interact with others, they completely lost it.
Wow, that's so smart.
Yeah. But then on the other side, we hired people that we may not otherwise have because maybe they were really nervous and didn't do that well in the interview, but they were super engaged and like went straight up to the staff members and like wanted to know and asked really great questions. And then they ended up being really good staff. Right.
That's
So
awesome.
it like ended up being like one of the best additions to our hiring practices that we ever did, because interviews are scary.
Yeah.
Right? You don't really know what you're getting into. We just dumped all this information on them. They're nervous. They're like, what is even happening? Because it was a very uncommon hiring practice, the way that we did things.
Mm-hmm.
But also that was can you roll with the punches here? Because we do things different. We don't just do the same old. But to throw that in and have them just really interact with someone who literally could be their seatmate, sitting right next to them on the floor, it told us so much.
And that probably was also good for those people that were the interactees, if you will.
Yeah.
To also be respected that, like, hey, we want to make sure that whoever you're going to be working with, you're going to like, too.
Yeah.
That also made them probably feel like, oh, wow, you actually care about who you're bringing on. You're not just bringing on aimless people because it fits.
We were very against just butts and seats.
Yeah.
Because then you just get turnover.
Yeah.
And it's expensive to hire. So if you're not hiring for your culture, you can really screw yourself over.
And it's time consuming. And like, if you just set yourself up from the beginning of who you're looking for and why. So I think that another cool thing too is that I've noticed that whenever I look for jobs too, there are like a lot of them nowadays, they do like those personality tests and stuff like that.
Yes.
I think that is so important.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, some people do lie on those tests, I've heard, which is like so sad because I will literally be like, this is me. I don't care.
Yeah. Well, they'll figure it out eventually, right?
Exactly. Like, you can't, unfortunately, lie about that kind of stuff.
Mm-mm.
But I think that's why things like that are becoming so much more prominent, because people, it is true, like at an interview, you kind of are putting your best self forward, or not your best self. Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're really nervous.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you actually have a personality test and stuff like that, like it's actually showing who you are as a character. And like, so for example, like if you are a Taurus and an Aries working together head to head, it might not be a good collaboration. Not that everyone uses horoscopes, but I know Enneagrams is a big one. The
Myers-Briggs.
Myers-Briggs. Yeah, there we go. That's a big one. Yeah. I've done like a couple other really random ones that I've never heard about before. Like it's so interesting.
Well, and some companies are building their own assessments now.
Yeah.
Where they can have some of their top performers from a certain role take the assessment, and then that's the benchmark. And then candidates take the assessment and see if their like key things line up with someone who's already excelling in that role, and then they can kind of tell whether or not they'd be successful in it. Like, and this is how crazy technology and all these assessments are now. But it's worth it, especially if you're a very large organization who has a very, like a big number of hiring people all the time.
Right.
Why not? I think it's cool.
Well, to me, when I see people do like those kinds of tests, it makes me realize that they actually do care about like who is working with who, right? Like, I find that if you are taking the time to look at other people's tests to see if they're going to match with like, especially if you are working in like a close-knit team. Like, so for example, for me, I used to work in like marketing departments, but there's other departments. I wouldn't really have to worry about the other departments and like how I work with them. But it was really important for me to work really well with the marketing department. If my personality did not fit well with the team, it probably would not be a good collaboration. We probably would not get a lot of work done. We'd always be fighting. Not that I would be fighting that much.
Yeah,
but
you're
like,
such a fighter.
I'm such a fighter. But like, I feel like that's a really important thing.
Yeah.
You know?
So
I think
much. Yeah.
that is so, yeah. That's really cool. If I down the road have hire people, I probably would do a couple tests and also see their horoscope. Because I think horoscopes do.
When is your birthday?
It's
all stuff needs to know. That and what's your Enneagram? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And it's, so like there's so many tools, there's technology, there's so many different practices that you can put into place to try to make sure that you're getting the right people into the organization. But then there's also, I feel like it is the responsibility of the leadership to really make sure that that culture gets maintained.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot in coaching about like leaders bring the weather. That's one of my favorite lines. And it's really like them setting the tone for how things are going to work and what things are going to be like and how we're going to interact with one another and with our clients and what's going on, right? Like, are we always, hanging up the phone and being like, oh my God, can you believe that? Blah, 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 blah. Like that's showing that that's okay for your staff to be doing that as well. And so you really have to watch yourself and be portraying what you believe to be good and right for the organization. And that starts from the top and it needs to continue to trickle all the way down. But it can't just be that top person's responsibility either. Like everyone needs to be taking that ownership. Yeah. Which like one of the responses we got when we asked about this on Instagram was someone said 100% accountability. And that I'm making the assumption is that like for everybody to take that accountability, right? Yes. So that's the first commitment of conscious leadership that we talk about is 100% responsibility, right? Responsibility, accountability, I think they're kind of the same thing. And it's like we all have to own our own spot here. Yeah. And we all have to say like, yes, I'm committed to this. And it's not your responsibility. It's not your responsibility. It's not your responsibility. It's all of our individual responsibility to be making sure that we show up in this way. Yeah. Not always easy to do. No. But very important. I
was going to say, and that's why you have a job. No, I think that definitely aligns with like, because yes, it's everyone's responsibility. But like at the same time, if you are the higher up, and leading the company, you have to show by example because it's the trickle down effect, right? Yeah. So like people might not take it as seriously unless you're starting to do it too. Like I remember I one time had a boss and he's like, "Don't show up late." Yeah, he was always showing up late. And it's like, okay, well you can't do that.
That's not fair.
I was always early. I wasn't the late person because that stressed me out. But other people were showing up super late. And like, sure enough, they were always talking badly about them. And they were like higher up managers too. And that trickled down to other people. And they started to disrespect the owner as well. And I'm just like, okay, this is why we have to. It unfortunately does actually, I think, start at the top too. Yeah. Like you said, it brings the weather. I think that's a really cool saying.
Yeah. It's huge, right? Like, yeah, if the boss or the owner is showing up late every single day, yet expecting everybody else to be on time, like that's just disrespectful. Oh yeah. Or like have the conversation, like if there's a reason that they're late, or it's like, okay, this is my start time, that's your start time. Yeah. Then there's the conversation and it's very just open and out there. Yeah. But if everyone's supposed to be in there at 8 and you come in at 8:10, 8:15, 8:30 every day, and you're mad that other people were late, you have no leg to stand on. Yeah. But there's another place that I worked briefly as well where I'd never witnessed any of this, but it was said that the CEO had like screamed at people in front of other people and like had like kicked the photocopier and like Holy done shit. All these things. And while I hadn't witnessed it, and I think it had even been years since like a big outburst like that had happened, the fear amongst the staff of it ever happening again, or just the like diminished feeling of like being a valuable employee because maybe it happened to them just like continued to trickle, and there was no respect for leadership in that organization at all because they were just waiting for it to happen again.
Yeah.
And so they didn't take the rules seriously, and they didn't take the leadership seriously, and that culture was just really, really toxic. And I tried really hard to help bring it together. There was a lot of work that was done, and we did make some strides. But when the leaders can't see for themselves that they are a big part of that issue and that the weather that they're bringing is exactly what they're getting here, there's no helping those people.
Yeah.
That's where the ego is like full blown in the way.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah. Sometimes you just want to hold a mirror up.
Ooh.
But when they're signing your paychecks too, that could be a scary thing to do.
I was gonna say. But then, again, that's where I think, and again, this is because I've been watching a lot of TikTok, people are starting to be more vocal and like say, look, we're pushing back.
Yeah. I think that's
this
great.
This isn't what we're liking. The world, and that's the thing too, like the world is going to evolve, and with social media, people are realizing different aspects of like, oh, I can get a remote job. I can do this.
Yeah.
I can apply for a job that I may not be super qualified for because maybe they are willing to put a little more training for the right person. Like, people are starting to open their eyes a little bit. And again, I like sitting in my little position right now, and I feel super grateful for my position. Thank goodness. But yeah, I think more and more people are just starting to realize, and as a leader, I think that's when you need to get the coaches and put the mirror against yourself and say, what am I representing for my company right now?
Yeah.
Is it a part of my value or the company values? Am I leading those values? But
yeah. And you don't have to wait for it to get that bad to do that check either, right? Like, that is a healthy thing to be checking in on a regular basis anyway.
Right. And how much more impactful that you took the step without having to get a whole bunch of people say, hey, we're unhappy.
Yeah. Or
a bunch of people leaving. Yeah, exactly. You lose your top sellers. And that's a sad thing too. Like, a lot of people are like, I'm getting paid a lot of money, but I'm not happy. That's sad.
Yeah,
That makes me really sad. And it's half of it is down to company culture and not them not being heard. Which is really sad. But
yeah. So it is really important, right? And it's whether you're a solopreneur, which I know can get really weird and lonely, and you kind of wish you had a big team with you.
I said that was actually one of our comments. Someone said, me, myself, and I with a little shrug emoji. And it said, it gets weird and lonely, and I wish I had some company. Yeah.
Well, to whoever said that, because we don't out you here.
Nope.
Maybe there's like a pseudo company that you can have, right? Maybe there's other solopreneurs that you check in with who have similar values and are running their business in a similar way too. And it just kind of takes away some of that loneliness.
Exactly.
Or us. You reach out to us. If you're feeling lonely, just give us a shout. We're here. But yeah, like, I think there's so many reasons. I mean, you could have turnover, you could have terrible customer service. Really, all those things are going to impact your bottom line.
Yeah.
So if you're not taking care of your company culture and you're not really clear on what it is you want your company culture to be, all of this can start just being all those little slippages that are taking away from all the hard work that you're doing.
Exactly.
So don't be afraid to just take a moment and look at it and be like, hey, are there any culture vultures in my organization? Am I the culture vulture?
Yeah.
You know, you could be discrediting it from the top down and not even realizing it. So I think this is a really important thing for people to get clear on.
And even for those who are solo entrepreneurs, think about your own personal culture as you work.
Absolutely.
A big thing for me is like I said, I set boundaries and rules, saying no to certain jobs, not working on weekends or past work hours if I can help it. Sometimes I still buffering meetings. That's a big one for me, and taking time when I'm starting to feel that burnout. That's a big one because there is no culture when I am burnt out to a crisp. So
that's for sure.
Yeah.
That made me think of a cool thing too. I saw the Conscious Leadership Group sends out their newsletter all the time, and something that they've all recently committed to is meetings will now, instead of being 60 minutes, are only going to be 50 minutes. So there's always that 10-minute buffer guaranteed that if there is another meeting right after, that at least they have a little bit of breathing space.
Oh,
so it's like important. Little things like this make the world of a difference.
It sets yourself up for success.
Yeah.
And then just think about it. If you have those defined like rules and stuff in place, if you then start to slowly add people onto your team, just how much more impactful it could be that you're not being like, frantic. Oh, this is what's going on.
Yeah. How do we hold ourselves accountable and what do we do here? And start from day one with person number one.
Yeah.
And grow from there. If you're already beyond that, that's okay too. It's not too late to just take a moment. Maybe you want to do a little mini retreat with yourself, or like you could reach out to me and talk it through. Like I'd be happy to guide someone through looking at okay, before I grow any bigger, what do I really need to get clear on? That's something that I can help with too. So don't be afraid to reach out before it gets to the point where you can't wrap your heads around it. And then you're like, what is the weather that I'm bringing right now? And maybe it doesn't feel like it's what I want it to be. But it's never too late to say I need help.
Yes.
Yes. Did that land for you?
I was going to look like I was going to say something, but I then lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
As per usual. The heat, it's getting to me.
Got to. It happens.
But yeah, we would, as always, we want to turn to you as well. And what are your thoughts on this? Are you perhaps part of a company that has great culture and you'd love to share? We would love to hear about it.
I always like to hear the good and the bad.
Yeah,
I mean, I want to hear what's working and then like what drives you crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, because like it's been a while since I've been in an office. Like I am kind of curious what is working nowadays, and again that's why I'm so excited about TikTok. Because I'm like, ooh, this is so interesting. I'm not part of this at all, but I'm like, support. Yeah, October, whatever.
I'm gonna walk out too.
Yeah, I'm gonna walk out. Walk my dog.
Yeah, love it.
But yeah, no, like we always want to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions as always. If you like this episode, please leave a like, share, follow, leave a review. We would really appreciate it. And
don't be a culture vulture.
Yeah, don't be a culture vulture. Even on yourself as a solo entrepreneur.
Yes, agreed. And until next time.
Bye.
See you later. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Thriving Tides. Hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.
Follow us, Thriving Tides, on Facebook, Instagram, and now YouTube to stay connected. And remember, don't fight the rip currents.